My name is Mr. Collins, and I'm the head of History and Politics. I'm very pleased that you've chosen politics as one of your A-level options. In this induction lesson, I'd like to give you an introduction to Paper 3, Political Ideas. Before we start this lesson content and activities, I thought it was important to outline quickly with you what you will study for Paper 3, Political Ideas. For Paper 3, you'll study 4 political ideas: liberalism, conservatism, socialism, and nationalism. For each political idea, you'll learn about different ideas about human nature, society, the state, and the economy. For each idea, you will also learn about 5 or 6 specified key thinkers and analyse their writings in depth. You will be expected to bring in your learning from Paper 1, UK Politics, and Paper 2, US Politics Comparative, to provide real-life, current and historical examples of these political ideas in action. It is important to stress that these political ideas do not equate with political parties in the UK. For example, the Conservative Party draws upon ideas from all of these political ideas above, just to different extents and depending on who you are in the Conservative Party. In this induction lesson, I'm going to be ambitious and give you an introduction to some of the key elements of the first political idea we'll study, liberalism, and give you a taste of one of liberalism's key thinkers, John Stuart Mill, all through the lens of the UK government's response to COVID-19. For this challenge, you are going to analyse timelines of actions and interventions taken by the UK government during the COVID-19 pandemic. You are going to analyse how liberals in general and classical liberals in particular would view the government response. Before you do this, I'm going to teach you the general principles and values of liberalism, the specific principles and values of classical liberalism, namely the concepts of negative liberty, the minimal state, laissez-faire economics, and equality of opportunity. I will also finish the teaching segment by teaching you some important aspects of the work of key thinker John Stuart Mill, specifically the harm principle and self-regarding and other regarding actions. I'll let you know when you are ready to go on to the activity after I've taught you and walk you through these concepts. So first we must ask the question, what is liberalism? Well, there's no exact definition, but a basic definition we could use is that liberalism is a political philosophy based on liberty, government by consent, and equality before the law. Put very simply, liberty means freedom. Government by consent means that the government rules over you with your approval, or at least your involvement in the system which approves the government. And equality before the law means that the law treats you equally, irregardless of any particular characteristic that you have. For example, your sex, your gender, an ethnic or racial characteristic, your age, your class, and the list would go on. From this diagram, you can see that liberalism has some core ideas. The most important at the top of the diagram here is freedom. Over the next few slides, I'll talk to you specifically about what classical liberals believe about freedom. There are some other key concepts as well, and there are 6 underneath here. You can pause here and have a look at these now and take a look at them later in light of what I teach you. However, I won't go into detail during this lesson about liberal ideas concerning individualism, equality, limited government, rationalism, tolerance, and liberal democracy. but I'll touch on them in part. Although we've just given a basic definition of liberalism, actually there isn't just one type of liberalism, there are many types. For your exam, you'll have to know mainly two types of liberalism, one being classical liberalism and one being modern liberalism. In the following slides, I'll try to give you the outline of what these two types of liberalism entail. Now that's complicated. We're now going to focus in on classical liberals in particular and try and make more sense of that by looking at their beliefs about freedom in practice. And in a few slides' time, look at it through the lens of the COVID-19 crisis. So to reiterate, classical liberals believe that freedom simply means freedom from interference. The smaller the interference in your life, the more free you are. The smaller government is, the more free you will be. Government will play a role in protecting your freedoms and rights, but government, in a large part, should stay out of your life. To be free means to be able to do what you want and not be restricted by others. Negative freedom, therefore, is the absence of physical and legal obstacles. For example, if there are laws that criminalise something you would like to do, you would say this was harming your negative freedoms. Or if somebody physically blocked or restrained you, you would say this affected your negative freedom. So logically, this belief in negative freedom meant that classical liberals favoured what we term a minimal state or night watchman state, a minimal government, a night watchman government. They favoured a small government, a small state, largely consisting of a military, an army or navy or air force for common defence, and a police force and a court system just to enforce negative rights. They also call this a night watchman state because the government's there to stand watch like a guard to enforce property rights. All of this implying rather than a government that provides welfare and public services, that interferes greatly and significantly, not only in society, but also in people's pockets, in their wallets and in their bank accounts by taxing them heavily. And logically, by nature, classical liberals favour something called laissez-faire economics. Laissez-faire is French for let do, as in let people do as they choose, as they think best. Classical liberals wanted as few state regulations, as few subsidies to help people or bail people out, as few taxes as possible. All of these, they said, limited negative freedom, and all were argued to undermine the freedom and effectiveness of what we call the free market. Too much interference by the government, which would be bad for economics, bad for business. Classical liberals did, though, believe in equality, but they believed in something called equality of opportunity. They said equality is where everyone has a fair chance to succeed and the outcomes reflect their talent and effort. What they rejected is an idea called equality of outcome, where everyone has the same wealth, income and standard of living. Liberals do not just argue that this is not possible, but they also say it's not desirable because it doesn't reflect freedom. Freedom will result in inequality of outcomes. people will choose to work harder, choose to invest their money in different ways, choose to express their individuality in different ways, choose different careers, spend their money on different things. So it was about equality of opportunity, not equality of outcome. Adding more to the idea of equality of opportunity, classical liberals and modern liberals, we'll see, believe in the importance of formal equality of opportunity. What that means is in law there is non-discrimination. Individuals should not be prevented from succeeding or accessing services because of their race, religion, gender or sexual orientation. Equality should be enshrined in the law to make sure there are no barriers based on those characteristics. And they promote what we call a meritocracy, a society in which jobs and power are awarded on the basis of merit. People at the top should be the most talented, not just those who are the wealthiest or best connected, or had the most privileged position at the start. Now imagine by this point you are already thinking critically about the flaws or the questions you might raise about some of the tenets here of classical liberalism. I'm going to now, in a very concise and quick way, just introduce you to one of the key thinkers who writes about negative liberty in particular. John Stuart Mill wrote a book called On Liberty in 1859, and in this book he expounded a principle which has become famous in liberal thinking, and it's known as the harm principle. And what John Stuart Mill says is that the only purpose for which power can be rightfully exercised over any member of a civilized community against his will is to prevent harm to others. In short, the only reason a government can restrict or constrain or interfere in your life is if your actions can be reasonably demonstrated as being harmful to others. Mill went on to say that actions that do not impact the freedom of others, like things that you say or write or what you think in your own head about religion, what he called self-regarding actions, that also went to things that you eat or drink or what you dress, how you dress. He said that state interference, government interference, is not justifiable in these actions. He, on the other hand, said there are other regarding actions, actions that clearly do limit the freedom of others. For example, violent behaviour that harms other people. And in these cases, Mill said the state can justifiably interfere. Mill even claimed that government state interference was unacceptable, even when self-regarding actions were harmful to the individual who was doing it to themselves. Mill said his own good, either physical or moral, is not a sufficient warrant. He cannot rightfully be compelled to do or forbear because it will be better for him to do so, because it will make him happier, because in the opinion of others to do so would be wise or even right, because over himself, over his own body and mind, the individual is sovereign. Now that's complex language from the 19th century, but in short what it says is the government nor society or any official or any other person cannot interfere and force somebody to do something because they believe it right for him to do so, or it'll make them happier, or it's wise or right or moral, unless it is harmful to another person, because an individual person is free in body and mind to do what they want to do, as long as it doesn't harm others. You now should be in a position to make a start on the challenge that I've set you. I'm not going to read through this slide again. Pause, and read through this slide yourself. When you're ready, you can open Resource 1 and complete the activities. I've set activities that are broken into 4 main questions or parts, each with subsidiary questions. You should definitely attempt at least 2 of the parts. You might want to do all 4. At points you will have to probably go back and look over the slides on particular concepts just to remind yourself of the details. For example, when you reach a part of an activity which gets you to consider the harm principle and the ideas of J.S. Mill, you may want to return to the slides on J.S. Mill's view of the harm principle. So open up Resource 1 now and complete.